Hey guys, this is Tong and I have another video about basketball. This time I'm going to list my top 25 players of all time. Now I don't really want to do top 10 because for the 9th or 10th spot it gets pretty close. I want to do top 25 just because there's so many good players. I want to give some of my arguments and reasonings behind some of them and maybe you guys can agree. So going from number one is obviously Michael Jordan, as everyone has Michael Jordan as the top number one spot. Greatest player ever. He has an insane competitive spirit. There's a lot of good reasons why he's the number one. 6 rings, 6 finals appearances, never lost a finals, 6 finals MVP. So he got the finals MVP in every finals, which means, you know, he was the most valuable player every time. 5 MVPs. I think he was actually robbed of a few to Karl Malone and Charles Barkley. And 10 scoring titles, the most ever. 30 points per game regular season. That is tied with Wilt Chamberlain. 33 points per game playoffs career average. So that is the highest ever in the playoffs. Highest in both categories. And he's not only the greatest scorer ever, but also one of the greatest defensive players ever. He got Defensive Player of the Year, one of the only guards to do so. And he just, you know, in terms of steals, he's top 5 all time in steals as well. So he's just a complete player. Defensively, offensively, he's a complete player. One season he averaged 32, 8, and 8 in 1988-89. Career average 36 and 5. So yeah, there's not many people that can compete with Michael Jordan. He is just untouchable. So number one is obviously MJ. Okay, number two, in my opinion, is Magic Johnson. Because he is the greatest team player ever, I think, in my opinion, he's very, very competitive. He won 5 rings with the Lakers, as everyone knows. 9 finals appearances in 12 years is amazing. I've not seen anything like that since Bill Russell. And yeah, Magic is just incredibly successful. 3 MVPs, 3 finals MVPs. One finals MVP should have actually gone to Kareem in 1980. But anyways, Magic is on the record as having 3 finals MVPs. He is the greatest passer of all time with an 11 assist average in the regular season and 12 assist average in the playoffs. I think his career high assist is like 24 or something ridiculous like that. One of the most dynamic players to watch ever. And immediately he brought the Lakers to a championship in his rookie year. And yeah, one of the best all-around players ever. Career average 27 and 11, and second most triple-doubles after Oscar Robertson. Third on my list is Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. He is a great team player as well. Unstoppable hook shot. He has the sky hook, obviously the most unstoppable move in basketball history. He is the NBA's all-time leading scorer. This is despite not playing until after 4 years of college, which was mandated back then. So he couldn't join the NBA until he had 4 years of college. So keep in mind that he started the NBA when he was 22. So he could have scored even more than that. But even despite that, he is the NBA's all-time leading scorer. He played 20 seasons in the NBA, so he's a really durable player. Record 6-time MVP, 6 championships, 10 finals appearances, 2 finals MVPs, even though it should be 3. I think Magic stole one of them from him. Number 3 in rebounds and number 3 in block shots. This despite the fact that block shots were not counted in Kareem's first 4 seasons in the NBA. He was so dominant that he won a ring in his second year in the league. And unlike other centers, he's not bad at free throws. He's about like a 74% free throw shooter. And career average of 25, 11, and 4. Keep in mind that he did this for 20 years. Okay, so that is number 3. Number 4 is Wilt Chamberlain. I think Wilt is the most dominant player ever. He averaged 50 points a game before, which is insane. 7-time scoring champion, all-time rebounding leader, despite only playing 13 seasons. Also keep in mind that Wilt didn't come into the league until he was 22, just like Kareem. So Wilt could have broken even more records had he been able to come directly from high school, just like kids these days. He's the second greatest blocker ever next to Russell. They didn't keep track of block shots back then, but I'm pretty sure Wilt would have been second on that place. Led the league in assists before for a center. That's pretty impressive. 100 points in a game, 55 rebounds in a game. The records go on. He has like over 90 NBA records. 4 MVPs, 2 rings, 6 finals appearances, 1 finals MVP. Would have been 2 if they had them back in 1967 when he was playing with the 76ers. Never fouled out of a game. Averaged 30 and 23 for his career, which is the most gaudy stats of any player in NBA history. So stats wise, Wilt Chamberlain is like untouchable, even by Jordan. Like 30 and 23, that's like unheard of. Like even if someone put up 30 and 23 in a game right now, that would be amazing. And this guy averaged that for his career. He was way ahead of his competition at the time. That's part of one reason, but he was just an incredible player. He couldn't win more rings because against Boston, they had a lot of Game 7s, and Sam Jones and John Havlicek, a whole bunch of those other players, were really, really clutch. And they made a lot of really lucky shots in Game 7s, so a lot of Wilt's games were lost based on Game 7s where he just basically lost by 2 points, basically. So I'm not putting that against Wilt Chamberlain. He could have won more, he just got unlucky. Wilt Chamberlain actually averaged over 48 minutes a game one season before, and actually averaged about 46 minutes a game for his entire career, which is just astounding when you consider that players these days rarely average over 33, 35 minutes a game. So the fact that he had that much stamina is just incredible. He would played pretty much every minute of every game during his entire career. Unlucky. Number 5, Bill Russell. Bill Russell has the most rings ever, 11 rings in 13 years, with 12 finals appearances. He is the greatest champion in professional sports history, I think. From the time he entered the league until he retired, the Celtics were great. And despite what people say that Russell had a great team, the Celtics couldn't even make the playoffs until the year Russell showed up. And after Russell left, they couldn't make the playoffs again. So think about it. I don't think the Celtics were that great until Russell showed up. So Russell was the best player there. 5 MVPs, numerous finals MVPs if they existed back then. They didn't exist in Russell's time, but he would have gotten like, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 more. Greatest team player ever, I think, along with Magic and Bird. He is one of the greatest competitors ever, and the second greatest rebounder ever. Wilt is the first. Probably the all-time leader in block shots, had block shots been counted in his time. Definitely Russell has been the greatest defensive player that people say, back in the 50s and 60s. They say that he was the greatest defensive player ever. Averaged 15 and 23 for his career. In the playoffs, he is the all-time rebounder with an astounding 25 rebounds a game average, even more than Wilt Chamberlain. Okay, number 6, Tim Duncan. Tim Duncan, reason why I have him so high, he never missed the playoffs. Still playing at a great level, despite not playing in the NBA until after 4 years of college. So just like Wilt and Kareem, he didn't play until after college, just like Russell as well. So think about that. Duncan could have been even more dominating if he came in earlier. 5 rings, 6 finals appearances. He missed a ring just off of one Ray Allen three-pointer, I believe. So almost 6 rings. 2 MVPs, 3 finals MVPs. He is one of the greatest team players ever, in the same vein as West and Russell, Magic, Bird. And his consistent success, that's why I put him up here above LeBron, Bird, and Kobe. Average 20, 11, and 3 for his career. Not bad. Number 7, LeBron James. I really made a pretty good case for LeBron in my other video, why I like him so much. LeBron versus Bird is a pretty good debate. But for me, I think LeBron is the better player because he is the more athletic player, the better defensive player. Stats show that he's pretty clutch as well, even though Bird is also pretty clutch. But yeah, statistically and defensively, I think he's better than Bird. Great team player, 4 MVPs, 2 rings, 6 finals appearances, 5 in a row, actually. 2 finals MVPs, and averaged 27, 7, and 7, which is by far the best stats out of any player of his era. So that's LeBron James. Number 8, Larry Bird. So right below LeBron, I put Bird. Bird is one of the greatest team players ever, one of the greatest shooters ever. He led the Celtics to become relevant again in his rookie year. Right after he joined the Celtics, they went from like last in the league to like first in the league, I think. Became one of the best clutch players ever as well. 3 rings, 5 finals appearances, 3 MVPs, 2 finals MVPs, and averages of 24, 10, and 6. So that just proves that he is one of the best all-around players ever, along with LeBron, Oscar, and Magic. And definitely, I think he is the best white player ever. So that is Larry Bird. Number 9, I put Kobe Bryant. So despite the fact that I still think Kobe is a little bit overrated, I still have him in my top 10. And the reason for that is because he just has longevity. He played 20 seasons in the league, third all-time in scoring. You just can't ignore those things. He's a great competitor. One of the most skilled defensive players ever, even though he's not that efficient. He scored 81 points in the game before, albeit against a pretty bad defensive team, and averaged 35 points a game before. He has 5 rings, 7 finals appearances, 1 MVP, 2 finals MVPs, and averages a 25, 5, and 5. Makes him a pretty solid second greatest shooting guard ever. Okay, right below Kobe, I have number 10, Jerry West. Jerry West is somewhat underrated, I think. I think he's one of the best team players ever. And if you think about what he did after his basketball career, like constructing the Showtime Lakers and Kobe Shaq Lakers, he's definitely one of the best basketball executives ever as well. He's a great competitor, clutch player. His nickname is Mr. Clutch. Losing would literally make him sick. That's what I heard. The only player on the losing team to have a finals MVP. So, and he's the NBA logo. He has 1 ring, 9 finals appearances, 1 finals MVP, and great all-around averages of 27, 6, and 7. So that's almost like LeBron-like. Jerry West, along with Walt Frazier, in my opinion, is also one of the greatest defensive guards of all time. So if the Defensive Player of the Award existed back then, I think Jerry West would have won one for sure. Number 11, Oscar Robertson. Oscar is one of the greatest all-around players of all time. I just couldn't put him higher because he has only 2 finals appearances compared to West with 9. West has 9 finals appearances, but Oscar only has 2. He couldn't get a ring until he played with Kareem. He has 1 ring, 2 finals appearances, 1 MVP, and pretty amazing career averages of 26, 7, and 9. And obviously, people know that he averaged a triple-double in a season before and actually across the first 5 years of his career. So amazing player, but I still think Jerry West is a bit better. Okay, number 12, Shaquille O'Neal. Shaq is the most dominant center of modern times, basically the second evolution of Wilt. Shaq was unstoppable in the early 2000s. I think he averaged something like 36 and 14 during those Lakers playoffs. It's ridiculous. He wasn't as skilled as Kareem, but he used his physical force to dominate most opponents, and that's why he has one of the highest field goal percentages ever at 58%. Even Kareem with the skyhook wasn't as accurate. Kareem only has a slightly lower 56%. But regardless, I think Shaq was the center of the 2000s with 4 rings, 6 finals appearances, 1 MVP, 3 finals MVPs, and a 24-11-3 career average. So I have Shaq at number 12. Just below Shaq at 13, I have Hakeem Olajuwon. People often debate between Hakeem and Shaq, which one was actually better. I think Shaq was more dominant for sure, but Hakeem had more skill. So in the end, Hakeem was definitely the better defensive player. The all-time leader in blocks, but keep in mind that blocks weren't counted during Wilt and Russell's time. So he could have been number 3, I think. But anyways, as the stats are counted, he is number 1 all-time leader in blocks. 2 rings, 3 finals appearances, 1 MVP, 2 finals MVPs, and a career average 22, 11, and 3. He's also the only center to be top 10 in steals as well. So that just shows you that he is a complete player. And the fact that he raises his scoring average substantially in playoffs is pretty nice as well. His scoring average goes up like 4 or 5 points in the playoffs, which is amazing. So that is Hakeem Olajuwon. Number 14, Dr. J, Julius Erving. If you include his ABA career, I think Dr. J is hands down the 3rd best small forward of all time, right behind LeBron and Bird. He was so dominant in his time. I think he was one of the greatest showmen in the game with his dunks and stuff, his acrobatic moves. 3 rings if you count the ABA, 6 finals appearances if you count the ABA, 4 MVPs, again counting the ABA, and 2 finals MVPs if you count the ABA. And if you look at his career stats in the NBA, or actually combined ABA and NBA, 24, 7, and 4, which makes him a pretty well-rounded player. So that's Julius Erving. Number 15, I have his teammate Moses Malone. I think Moses, pretty underrated center. I think one of the great centers. Moses was a dominant scorer and rebounder. He is the greatest offensive rebounder ever and the all-time leader in that category. Moses has a ring, 2 finals appearances. He took the Houston Rockets pretty much on his back. 3 MVPs, 1 final MVP, and a career average 21-12. So pretty good stats as well. And a center you just always want to have on your team. He just does all the dirty work. Kind of like Wes Unseld in a way, but better. Okay, number 16, John Havlicek. I think John Havlicek is also pretty underrated if you ask me. He has 8 rings, which is a perfect 8-0 in the finals. It's a better record than even Jordan, which is 6-0. 8 finals appearances, 1 finals MVP. His lack of MVPs, while his teammate Dave Cowan's got an MVP, is rather suspicious. I don't know why he never got an MVP. But he was the greatest all-around player between Oscar until Magic showed up. And he has averages of 21, 6, and 5, which prove that he's a really good all-around player and a very clutch player as well. Anyone remember when Havlicek stole the ball? Anyways, that's John Havlicek, at number 16. What ranks John Havlicek above Elgin Baylor and Rick Barry for me is the fact that although those guys were better offensive players, John Havlicek was an all-around great player with great defensive presence as well. So all around, I think he's a better player, and the fact that he made so many clutch shots and led his team to so many championships is what ranks him this high for me. Number 17, I have Karl Malone, the mailman, the second greatest power forward ever, one of the most durable players of all time, along with his teammate John Stockton, Kareem, Garnett, Duncan, Parrish, and Moses. He doesn't have any rings, which is why he gets ranked lower, much lower than Tim Duncan. But he does have 3 finals appearances, 2 MVPs, and he averaged 25 and 10 for an astounding 19 seasons. So, yeah, he was pretty durable. And getting those numbers makes him just one of the best players ever. Karl Malone is also number 2 on the NBA all-time scoring list. So that's what elevates him above other power forwards like Barkley and Garnett and Nowitzki. And also the fact that he has 2 MVPs, which, along with Duncan and Pettit, is the most for a power forward. Number 18, Elgin Baylor. Here we have another great player without any rings. He was the first dynamic player of the NBA, playing above the rim, and just like Wilt and Oscar, his stats are just astounding. He scored 71 points in a game before, averaged 38 points a season before, and career average 27, 14, and 4. That's pretty amazing. Have you ever seen anyone have 27 and 14 in a game? That's career average 27 and 14. That's pretty amazing. Even though he didn't win a ring, he did have 7 finals appearances. So just like West, he didn't get to get a ring until basically Wilt showed up. And unfortunately, he retired just before the Lakers got their ring. So that's just bad luck, I think. Number 19, I have Bob Pettit. Just like Baylor and Barry and Havlicek, I think Bob Pettit is a pretty underrated player. I think that's just because there's not much footage of him. He played in the 1950s. He only played 10 seasons, but he was definitely the best player of the 1950s, not named Bill Russell, and definitely the best white player of that time. He's one of the best power forwards ever. He was the all-time leading scorer until Wilt overtook him, and he was a fierce competitor. He retired at the top of his game. I think he was an all-star at the season he retired. He won only 1 championship with the St. Louis, now Atlanta Hawks, but 4 finals appearances, 2 MVPs. He was actually the first MVP, I think, when they first awarded it back in 1956. And no finals MVPs awarded back then. I think he would have had 1. And one of the best career averages ever, 26 and 16, which makes him the third all-time rebounder if you look at averages. And yeah, 26 points a game. I think he averaged over 20 points a game during his entire career. Bob Cousy. Okay, number 20 at Bob Cousy. He was a pioneer of point guards, basically Showtime before Showtime. He had all these no-look passes and thread the needle passes like Magic later made famous. He has all the stats and awards to prove it too. 8-time assist leader, which is amazing. John Stockton-like. 6 rings, 7 finals appearances, 1 MVP, and no finals MVPs they didn't have back then. Career average 18, 5, and 7, which means that he's definitely one of the best all-around players back then, along with West, Baylor, and Oscar. So Bob Cousy, I think, is up there. In number 21, I have Charles Barkley. During his prime, I think Barkley was the best player not named Jordan. He was just dominant at his peak. Like, he would just bully defenders on his way to the basket. And and a pretty famous dunker as well. Even though he never won a ring, he was a dynamic scorer and rebounder. He's one of the best undersized rebounders ever, I think, along with Wesley Seld and Dave Cowens. One finals appearance, which he lost to Jordan. One MVP and pretty gaudy career stats, 22, 12, and 4. And yeah, one of the best power forwards ever, I think. Alright, and at number 22, I have John Stockton. He is one of the best point guards ever. And a lot of people would even put him just number 1 or number 2, even ahead of Magic sometimes, depending on what your definition of a point guard should be. But one thing is certain, he is definitely the best pure point guard ever. And I put Cousy above him just because Cousy had better stats, more rings, and MVPs. But Stockton could just easily be up there. He is the all-time leader in assists and steals. Stockton he wasn't much of a scorer or a rebounder, but man, could he assist, and he did it well. He led the league in assists 9 times, and 2 finals appearances, even though he doesn't have any MVPs and rings, which puts him a little bit lower, but still. Career stats, 13.3 and 10.5. He's the second highest career assist average, just below Magic. And you have to keep in mind that he wasn't a really big guard like Magic either. So he's just a great pure point guard. And he's basically the Michael Jordan of assists, basically. So led the league in assists 9 times. And just below that, number 23, I have Kevin Garnett. I think Garnett is one of the best defenders and fiercest competitors of the modern era, I think. I put him ahead of Dirk Nowitzki just because of the defense aspect. And even though Nowitzki was a better scorer, Garnett wasn't too far behind. He has 1 ring, 2 finals appearances, 1 MVP, and he's been playing for over 20 seasons, which is pretty amazing, with a career stat of 19, 10, and 4. So pretty good stats all around. In his prime, he was a better power forward than Tim Duncan, many people say. So that is Kevin Garnett. Number 24, I have Rick Barry. I think Rick Barry is pretty misunderstood. I think, yeah, he wasn't a great person to get along with, but neither is Kobe or Jordan, and they don't get any flack for it. Rick Barry is just a great competitor. He led the NBA and ABA scoring before. He once averaged 36 points a game in the NBA. I think that was just his second year in the league. He averaged that much. And he led the underdog Warriors to a championship. He has 1 ring, 2 finals appearances. He should have had an MVP in 1975, but it was voted on by players back then. And since Rick Barry wasn't a very personable person, that's why he didn't win an MVP. But he should have won an MVP in 1975. And he has 1 finals MVP. And with career averages of 25, 7, and 5, he's definitely one of the best all-around players ever. And I think he's routinely underrated because people put Scottie Pippen and James Worthy and stuff ahead of in this great small forwards conversation, but that should be Rick Barry's spot. And he's definitely one of the best white players ever, along with Bird, West, Cousy, Pettit, and Havlicek. Rick Barry also has one of the highest free throw percentages in NBA history at 90%. I think only a few NBA players like Steve Nash have a higher free throw percentage. This is despite Rick Barry using a very unique underhanded style free throw. Okay, and lastly but not least, number 25 in my list out of the top 25 players of all time is David Robinson. In his prime, he was just the best center, period. That's just, in my opinion. I know that there's Patrick Ewing, Shaq, Hakeem, and I know that people say that Hakeem embarrassed him in the playoffs, and yeah, I know Hakeem did beat him in the playoffs, but in the regular season, I think I would take David Robinson. In the regular season, the Spurs actually beat the Rockets more. I think Robinson was just gold in the regular season. He just couldn't push his game up a level in the playoffs like Hakeem did. But he did score over 71 points in the game before. He had a quadruple-double before, 2 rings, 2 finals appearances, 1 MVP, and just a great defensive player. He was Defensive Player of the Year, just like Hakeem before. And career stats, 21, 11, and 3. He is one of the most athletic centers of all time. And keep in mind the fact that he came into the NBA a bit late because he was serving in the U.S. Navy. So if he was just able to serve in the if he was able to come into the NBA earlier, then his career stats would be even better. So keep that in mind. And that's it. That's my list of top 25 NBA players of all time. Please comment if you like it, if you agree with it, or don't agree with it. Just leave a comment and yeah, let me know how you feel. And again, Thanks for watching, and please subscribe if you like these kind of videos, as I will be posting more basketball videos sometimes. That's it. Hey guys, so I want to continue my list of the greatest basketball players of all time. I know that originally I wanted to make a top 25 list of the greatest basketball players, but you know, there's just so many great basketball players that I want to continue rounding up the top 50 list, and I think that top 50 list is a pretty good list to start with. So let's continue. I stopped at number 25, which I put David Robinson. I ranked David Robinson at number 25, so I shall continue on with the list to round up the rest of my top 50. Number 26, I have Dirk Nowitzki. He is the German juggernaut, one of the most lethal scorers in NBA history, especially for his height, and one of the top 5 power forwards of all time, one of the greatest players of his generation in general. His average is 22 and 8 for his 18-year career so far. He's still going. He has one of the most unstoppable shots in NBA history, the one-legged fadeaway, which ranks right up there with Kareem's skyhook, and also took the Mavericks to a title with only one other Hall of Famer, that being an out-of-his-prime Jason Kidd, and he beat the Miami Heat with the big three, LeBron James, Chris Bosh, and Dwayne Wade, which is pretty impressive. So yeah, he's an all-time great clutch player, won a ring with the Dallas Mavericks, 2 finals appearances, 1 MVP, and 1 finals MVP. Okay. So that's number 26. Number 27, I have Dwayne Wade. Dwayne Wade is the second best shooting guard of his generation, in my opinion, right next to Kobe. In his prime, he was arguably better than Kobe and equal or better than Iverson and T-Mac in their primes as well. He put up an all-time great performance in 2006 NBA Finals. Averaged something like 38 points and 9 rebounds, 10 assists or something like that, something crazy. It was an all-time great performance. I think the all-time highest per in an NBA Finals of all time, willing the Miami Heat to the title in that year against Dirk Nowitzki. And the average is 24, 5, and 6 for his career, which is quite good. You can see that he's known as one of the more unselfish shooting guards in NBA history with those averages. 6 assists a game is pretty good for a shooting guard. Plus the fact that he deferred to LeBron when he played with him. So pretty unselfish player, great shooting guard. 3 rings in total, 5 finals appearances, and 1 finals MVP. Alright, so number 28, I have Isaiah Thomas. Isaiah Thomas, also known as Zeke, one of the best small players of all time. He was 6 feet and under, along with Chris Paul, Allen Iverson, and Tiny Archibald. Isaiah Thomas is probably the best one out of these guys because he led the 1980s Piston dynasty to 3 finals and 2 rings. He was also the finals MVP in one of those. 3 finals appearances. All had all-time clutch and killer instincts. Remember when he played with a sprained ankle and had 25-point quarter, and was a strong leader despite his small stature. He was the second best point guard in the 80s, right next to Magic Johnson, and I think that's saying a lot, that being the 80s golden era of the NBA. Average 19, 4, and 9 for his career, so that's, I believe, one of the best career assist averages of all time. 9 assists a game. Number 29, right below Isaiah Thomas, I have Allen Iverson. I put Iverson slightly lower than Isaiah for the reason that Iverson couldn't get a ring, and he had only 1 finals appearance. But he was ultimately a more selfish player than Isaiah as well. He carried a pretty terrible team to the finals, but of course couldn't win against the Lakers. Won 4 scoring titles and had that killer instinct, but his inefficiency and inability to stick with a great team hurts his ranking. But I still put him this high because he had the MVP before, and just because he was such an unstoppable force for his size. So yeah, 1 MVP, no rings, but he averaged 27, 4, and 6 for his career. That's a pretty gaudy stat line. The fact that he did that when he's less than 6 feet tall is pretty incredible. So yeah, Allen Iverson, number 29. Alright, and right after Iverson, I have number 30, Kevin Durant, with 1 finals appearance and 1 MVP. Even though Durant is still in his prime, I haven't ranked this high because he would basically rank this high if he retired today. Even though he doesn't have a ring, he has pretty much everything else. He has 4 scoring titles, he has an MVP, and he's one of the most lethal and efficient scorers of all time, along with Steph Curry. He's the second best player in the world for much of his career, most of his career, overshadowed by LeBron James, but if you look at his career averages, he averaged 27, 7, and 4, which is very, very similar to LeBron's. The only category in which he trails LeBron is assists. So LeBron's a better passer than Durant is, but Durant is just as efficient a shooter and just as good a rebounder. So Kevin Durant has the ability to become a top 3 small forward of all time, in my opinion, if he keeps up his pace, and I think he will retire definitely in the top 3 small forwards of all time if he doesn't get injured. Alright, so right after that I have number 31, Jason Kidd. Jason Kidd is one of the great point guards of his generation, along with Steve Nash, and he's more of a do-it-all kind of guy compared to Nash. I actually went back and forth between Nash and Kidd at this spot, but in the end I put Jason Kidd ahead of Steve Nash for the reason that Jason Kidd is a superior defender, and he also has 1 ring and 3 finals appearances, which also beats Nash, although Nash has more MVPs. So Jason Kidd has 1 ring, 3 finals appearances, 5-time assist leader, just like Nash, number 2 all-time in assists, which is better than Nash, and he averaged 13, 6, and 9 for his career, which is quite good. It makes him a nightly triple-double threat, and he's an all-around better player than Nash. He's not quite as good a shooter as Nash was, but the fact that he has more assists all time, as well as a ring, better defense, and all-around better player, I put him ahead of Steve Nash. So that's Jason Kidd. And of course, number 32, right after Jason Kidd, I have Steve Nash. The other great point guard of his generation, he won 2 MVPs in his prime, but unfortunately he never got to a finals, which is why he ranks this low. And his average is 14, 3, and 8.5 for his career. Basically, he's the John Stockton of the 2000s. He's the best pure point guard of the generation. 5-time assist leader, just like Kidd. Number 3 all-time in assists, right below Kidd in that category. And he's a great shooter to boot. That's really good. As an offensive player, he's much better than Kidd. So he hit the 50, 40, 90 category for 2-point, 3-point free throw percentage, 4 years, which makes it more than anyone else. So he's a great shooter as well. Alright, number 33, I have Willis Reed with 2 rings, 3 finals appearances, 1 MVP, and 2 finals MVPs. Willis Reed, in my opinion, is the greatest New York Knick, and it's not really close in my opinion. I know some people may disagree with Walt Frazier and Patrick Ewing, but if you look at his awards and stats, I mean, they're the best out of any New York Knick. He just by far has the best. 2 rings, 3 finals appearances. I mean, 1 MVP, 2 finals MVPs. Averaged 19-13 for his career, which is quite good. And he willed the Knicks to their first championship on an injured ankle. So that was one of the most memorable finals moments ever. And captained the team to 2 of their only rings. So the fact that he brought the Knicks their only rings definitely should put Willis Reed up there. And what brings Reed down is that he only played 10 seasons, but during those 10 seasons he was pretty dominant. So yeah, that's Willis Reed. Number 34, I have Bill Walton with 1 ring, 1 finals appearance, 1 MVP, and 1 finals MVP. Bill Walton only had 3 healthy seasons in his entire NBA career. So why do I rank him this high? Well, the reason is because those 3 seasons were so dominant and so good, that's why he still ranks in most people's top 50. To give you an idea of how great a healthy Bill Walton was, for 2 of those 3 seasons he won a ring, an MVP, and a finals MVP, and he beat the likes of Dr. J and Kareem when he led the Trailblazers to the championship. And that's quite an accomplishment for any 3 seasons of an NBA player. He was just a great team player, as basically in the same vein as Bill Russell, averaging 13, 10, and 4 for his career. So that's Bill Russell. Alright, in number 35, I have George Gervin, the Iceman. The greatest scorer of his generation, Gervin has 4 scoring titles compared to 2 for Adrian Dantley, 1 for Alex English, 1 for Dominique Wilkins, and 1 for Pete Maravich, to give him a comparison with the other scorers of his generation. That also ties him for the same scoring titles as Allen Iverson and Kevin Durant. So they're basically the best scorers of their generations. Gervin introduced his signature finger roll to the NBA. He was definitely one of the most dynamic scorers of his generation, and he's a top 5 shooting guard of all time in my opinion. But what brings Gervin down is the fact that he never got to the finals, and thus he never had a ring or a finals MVP. But if you look at his stats, he averaged 25, 5, and 3 for his career, which is basically all you want of a shooting guard. You want your shooting guard to score a lot, rebound a little bit, and assist if possible. And that's, just 2 assists short of Kobe's career stat line. So that's definitely not bad at all. All right. Number 36, I have Elvin Hayes, the Big E, with 1 ring and 3 finals appearances. Number 6 all-time in rebounds. Led the league in scoring, rebounding before. The Big E was the dominant power forward of the 70s, averaged 21 and 12.5 a game for his 14-year career. He and Wes Unseld captained the 70s Washington Bullets, which is a pretty underrated team, and went to 3 finals appearances in that decade. I put him ahead of Wes because of his scoring prowess, although Unseld was just a dominant rebounder. So yeah, Elvin Hayes definitely up there in terms of power forwards, and the reason why he ranks so high in the all-time list is just because his career he played a lot of games. He didn't miss a lot of games in his career, and he played for 14 years. So that's pretty good. Number 37, I have Sam Jones. Sam Jones has the 2nd most championships in NBA history, right next to Bill Russell. He has 10 rings and 11 finals appearances. So compared to Gervin, Jones is not quite a dynamic scorer, but he's more of a quiet scorer. What brings Sam Jones up this high is basically the fact that he's really, really clutch, and that kind of, you can see why he has those 10 rings is because he and John Havlicek and Tom Heinsohn and Bill Russell, of course, basically accounted for most of the Celtics championships due to the clutch play. So he is a really good clutch player. A lot of the Celtics championships came on the end of the 7-game series, and oftentimes Sam Jones would make a clutch play to seal the win for them. Averaged 18, 5, and 3 for his career, which makes him the best Celtics shooting guard of all time, along with Bill Sharman. Alright, number 38, George Mikan. George Mikan, if you combine his pre-NBA awards and championships, which is the NBL. So the NBL was the predecessor to the NBA. And George Mikan, if you combine all that together, he has 7 rings, which is astounding, and 7 finals appearances, 1 MVP. George Mikan, he's really, really hard to rank because of the fact that he played in such an early era. But he's basically the reason why you have the shot clock today, and also part of the reason why you have goaltending as well. So because of his impact on the game, his legacy is massive. He is basically the first superstar of the NBA and the first dominant big man of the NBA. And the fact that he really influenced the NBA league rules a lot is why I rank him this high. But yeah, it's really hard to rank him because we don't know how he would fare in the later generation. But if you talk about his stats, he averaged 23 and 13 for his career, which is quite short. He only played 7 seasons. But yeah, we don't know how he would fare today. But yeah, it's just because of his legacy, the fact that he influenced the NBA a lot, that's why I rank him this high. Alright, number 39, right below George Mikan, I have Dolph Schayes. Dolph Schayes has 1 ring, 1 finals appearance, and 1 basically finals MVP if they had it at that time. Dolph Schayes is one of the greatest players of the 50s. I put him, he's technically a better player than George Mikan is, but I have him slightly below because he doesn't have as quite an impact of his legacy on basketball. But he was definitely one of the greatest players of the 50s, along with Cousy, Pettit, Arizin, and Russell. Schayes led the Syracuse Nationals to their only championship, was by far the greatest player on that team. I think he's also very underrated because he played in the 50s, but if you look at his stats, he averaged 18.5, 12, and 3 for his career, so he's quite the player back then. But it's too bad there's not much footage of him to go on, and this is the problem with a lot of 50s players as well. There's just not enough footage of him. So yeah, I'm going to try to find as many clips of him as I can, but that's it. Number 40, I have Chris Paul, CP3. I have CP3 all the way up here on my list because he is the greatest point guard of his generation. That is the best pure point guard of his generation. In the era of Russell Westbrook, Steph Curry's, and Derrick Rose's, Chris Paul is still the best pure point guard, and although he hasn't made it to a finals yet, Steve Nash didn't either. So yeah, I don't give I gave Steve Nash a pass for not making the finals and Gervin a pass for not making the finals, so I'm going to give Chris Paul a pass for that too. So eventually I do think CP3 will surpass Steve Nash in career stats and awards because he averaged 19, 4, and 10 for his career, and that is actually the third highest average assist rate of all time, right below Magic and Stockton. And it does amaze me that he hasn't won an MVP yet, though he was arguably robbed by Kobe back in 2008. And he also led the league in assists 4 times and in steals 6 times. So yeah, definitely the best point guard of his generation. Alright, 41, I have Stephen Curry. Curry is a recent addition, and I haven't ranked this high already because he definitely changed the game somewhat, because he changed the game of basketball basically from kind of an inside perimeter game it was already to even more sharpshooting game, basically. Him and Klay Thompson, basically. But the fact that he changes how the game is played, how defenses have to react to him, his 3-point percentage is better than most NBA players' 2-point percentage, which is saying a lot. So he's arguably the greatest shooter of all time. It's incredible, his shooting. Like 3-point percentage is amazing, off the charts, and of course he is really efficient at 2-point percentage and free throws as well. So definitely better than like Bird and Nowitzki and Ray Allen and all those other guys. Has 1 finals appearance, 1 ring, and 1 MVP so far. He's well on his way to more of those, because this year he's definitely in the leading for MVP. He has a chance to get a ring as well, so he can add to his resume. I definitely think he will have another MVP, so that's why I have him ranked this high already. And his averages are 22, 4, and 7. For some reason, he was a little bit lackluster in the last finals. He didn't win Finals MVP. That was against the LeBron's Cavaliers. So that's why I put him a little bit below CP3 yet, because he's not quite at CP3's level in terms of career accomplishments. But in terms of like shooting and impact on defense and changing the way that basketball is basically going to be played, inspiring a new generation of 3-point shooters, I have him up this high. Okay, number 42, I have Scottie Pippen. With 6 rings, 6 finals appearances, Scottie Pippen is always known as the Robin to Jordan's Batman, basically a sidekick player who rode Jordan's coattails to win 6 rings. But he was a pretty good player in his own right. He was the best defensive, I think he's one of the best defensive players of his generation, one of the best defensive small forwards of all time. And his career stats, which are just 16, 6, and 5, would have been a lot more impressive had he played by himself instead of with Jordan, who is known to be selfish. However, as is, he basically has to settle for a John Havlicek-like role. I mean, him and John Havlicek have similar stats, and both of them are really good defenders. So I guess you can think of him as basically his generation's Havlicek, and he helps his teammates wins lots of rings. And basically, that's basically good enough to put him in the top 50 for me. All right, number 43, I have Artis Gilmore. 1 ring, 1 finals appearance, 1 MVP, 1 finals MVP, if you count his ABA stats and awards. So Artis Gilmore, I think, is incredibly underrated just because he played his prime in the ABA. But along with Connie Hawkins, Dan Issel, Julius Erving, and Mel Daniels, he was one of the greatest ABA players ever. He is ahead of Hawkins, Issel, and Daniels on my list just because he played longer and he had a better NBA career. He averaged 19 and 12 for his career, and is surely one of the greatest players of all time if you include his ABA stats. He's actually number 5 all-time in rebounding if you include his ABA stats. He's also the NBA's all-time field goal percentage leader with 60% for his entire career. And even after his ABA prime, he continued to be a great player for the Bulls and Spurs. So I think Artis Gilmore routinely gets underrated, but I have him up here at my top 50. Number 44, I have Dave Cowens. With 2 rings and 1 MVP, Dave Cowens is the successor to Bill Russell. Cowens had the same fire and determination to win that Russell had, only not quite as good defensively, though just as dominant rebounding-wise. He led the 1973 Celtics to their best regular season record of all time, which still stands today. And although he never had a Finals MVP, he was pretty crucial in the Celtics' 1970s rings. And yeah, definitely one of the best competitive players ever. He was really undersized too as a center, just 6'9", just like Russell, but of course that competitive spirit, that's the type of guy you want to have on your team. Along with Nate Thurmond and Bob Lanier, Unseld, Malone, Walton, Gilmore, and Kareem, he was one of the marquee centers of his generation, averaging 18, 14, and 4 for his career, which is really good all-around stats. Alright, number 45, I have just under Dave Cowens, I have Wes Unseld with 1 ring, 4 finals appearances, 1 MVP, and 1 finals MVP.
I put Unseld slightly lower than Cowens because of Unseld's limited offensive ability, but as a rebounder and passer and team player, he was just as good as Cowens. He averaged 11, 14, and 4 for his career. Yep, so the guy averaged more rebounds than points, which is pretty impressive. I guess you could say that he was like the Dennis Rodman, or the Dennis Rodman with Dikembe Mutombo in that sense of his generation. He captained the Bullets to 4 finals appearances in the 1970s, and along with Elvin Hayes, led him to a championship. And he would always be the best Washington Bullets player of all time because of the fact that he led them to so many finals appearances, the only championship, and yeah, he worked in the front office for many years. So Wes Unseld, definitely one of the best team players ever you'd ever want to have on your team. Always doing the dirty work. Alright, number 46, I have Paul Pierce. 1 ring, 2 finals appearances, 1 finals MVP. I'm putting Paul Pierce ahead of James Worthy. I know a lot of people have James Worthy ahead of Paul Pierce in their top 10 small forwards list, but I'm putting Paul Pierce ahead because he was the main man for the 2000s Celtics, leading them to 2 finals appearances and 1 championship. He averaged 26 and 4 for his career, which is quite good, and along with John Havlicek, the best small forwards in Celtics history easily, and a top 10 small forward of all time. So he got the finals MVP on a team which had 4 future Hall of Famers in it. If you remember, he had Ray Allen, Kevin Garnett, Rajon Rondo playing with him on that team, and he was the one that won the finals MVP. So yeah, he is quite good. That's Paul Pierce. Number 47, Clyde Drexler. 1 ring, 3 finals appearances. Clyde the Glide Drexler. He's an all-around better player than Iverson or Gervin was as a shooting guard, but not quite as dominant as a scorer. And for a shooting guard, you basically want him to be a better scorer, which is why he's ranked lower. However, he did win a ring as a sidekick to Hakeem Olajuwon, which Iverson and Gervin never won, and averaged 26 and 6 for his career. So that's pretty good all-around stats. But for shooting guard, you basically want him to be you want him to score lots of points, and Drexler didn't score as many points as Iverson or Gervin, so that's why he's ranked lower. But as an all-around better player, as a rebounding shooting guard, he's one of the best of all time. Alright, 48, I have Walt Frazier. 2 rings, 3 finals appearances. Frazier was one of the best point guards of all time, and along with Willis Reed, he led the Knicks to 2 championships. In the 70s, he was a great all-around player, probably the best defensive point guard of all time, along with Jerry West and Gary Payton and Dennis Johnson. If steals were tracked more during his career, they were only tracked since 74, but if they tracked more during his career, I definitely think he would be top 5 all time. And yeah, basically right up there with Jason Kidd, Gary Payton, Dennis Johnson for the defense. He's really good defensive point guard, and not bad scoring wise either. If he averaged 19, 6, and 6 for his career, if you look at it, he's actually just 1 point shy of Clyde Drexler for his stats. So yeah, that's quite good. Basically an all-around great player. Alright, number 49, I have Paul Arizin with 1 ring, 1 finals appearance, and 1 finals MVP if they were existed but at that time. Here we have another great forgotten player of the 50s, but like Dolph Schayes and Bob Pettit, not much footage exists of him, but he was definitely the leader of the Philadelphia Warriors, which won the championship in the 1950s. So that accounts for something, I guess. Even though it's the 1950s, leading your team to a championship is still going to get you to the top 50 in my list. Averaged 23 and 9 for his career as a small forward, and I think along with his teammate Neil Johnston, I think Paul Arizin is one of the best scorers of his of the 50s. So yeah, more surprisingly is that both Dolph and Arizin don't have their numbers retired by any team yet, which should be the 76ers and Warriors respectively, which is quite bizarre. But yeah, definitely the best scorer of the 1950s, Paul Arizin. Alright, and for the last spot, number 50, I was debating a little bit at this spot. I was debating between Patrick Ewing and Dwight Howard for the last spot, and neither of them have rings, neither of them are known to be really clutch players, and both of them led their teams to finals appearances in their prime. But ultimately, I'm going to settle with Dwight Howard because of his defensive dominance. Ewing was a great defensive player as well, but if you look at Dwight Howard's awards and stats, he was a 3-time Defensive Player of the Year, 2 times blocks leader, and 5-time rebounds leader. So even though Dwight Howard played in a time many would say have less competition for centers, He was definitely the de facto dominant center of his generation. I mean, the only other center that really comes close was Shaq at the tail end of his career. So, yeah, Dwight Howard definitely comes on top for me. Ewing never led any category, even in scoring. I mean, scoring, rebounding, or blocks, Ewing never led anything, but Howard averaged 18 and 13 for his career while having those awards. If you look at Ewing, he averaged 21 and 10 overall. So overall, Ewing was a better scorer, but Howard was a better defensive player. And yeah, that definitely accounts for a lot, I think. And I think his reputation has created a lot because of his Lakers and Rockets ordeal, in his the misconception that he's a prima donna. But I definitely think Dwight Howard was a really good player in his prime. D12 was like the best center in the league in his prime. So that's it. Alright guys, so those are my top 50 players of all time. I hope you enjoyed that list and ranking. But because we're talking about the greatest basketball players of all time, it's really hard to put just 50 players on that list, which is why I'm going to have some honorable mentions, which are basically going to be my next 10 players on my list. But I'm going to mention people anyway. I have on my honorable mentions, I have Patrick Ewing, who is the Knicks' all-time leading scorer, led him to 2 finals appearances, and was the franchise player for the Knicks back in the 90s. Unfortunately, he didn't make my top 50, but he is definitely a great center. I think top 15-ish center, I think. Have Patrick Ewing and Mel Daniels, who I think is severely underrated because of his ABA career. Mel Daniels actually played his entire career in the ABA, which sucks, but in that league he won 3 rings and 2 MVPs, which is quite impressive. So awards, and also he's the all-time leading rebounder in the ABA, so that accounts for something. So I put Mel Daniels, definitely underrated. Then I have Bob McAdoo, great player in the 1970s. In his prime, he was a 3-time scoring champion and 1-time MVP. So Bob McAdoo also won championships with the Lakers later in his career, but also a great role player and a great scorer in his prime. And I have Neil Johnston, who is a great component of the 1950s Warriors. He and Paul Arizin helped lead the Warriors to that championship. And if you look at like win shares, I think Neil Johnston's like has one of the highest win shares of all time. I think he basically carried his team several seasons, and yeah, he was a great center, great component of the great player of the 1950s, and very underrated, Neil Johnston. Alright, and Kevin McHale. I didn't put Kevin McHale on my list because he just has a really lack of individual awards. He won 3 rings with the 1980s Celtics as the 2nd best player. I know that, but the fact that he never really won a Finals MVP or an MVP, so he's never really the best player. Basically a lack of individual awards is why I don't have him in the top 50, but skill-wise, he's definitely one of the greatest post-move players ever. He is probably the most staggering array of post moves ever, along with Hakeem Olajuwon. So in terms of that, that's why a lot of people have him in the top 10 power forwards list, because he is so skilled with his footwork and scoring. Alright, and I have Tom Heinsohn. Tom Heinsohn was an integral component of the 50s and 60s Celtics. He actually won Rookie of the Year the same year that Bill Russell came in. He won 8 championships in 9 seasons, which is incredible. I mean, you never find anyone with such a high win ratio of his career. I mean, that's incredible. And he's very associated with the Celtics for decades. In addition to being a Hall of Fame player, a really good power forward of his time. He was a coach, which led the 70s Celtics to several championships, and also a commentator as well. So Tom Heinsohn is definitely one of the best Celtics of all time. Kind of like the equivalent of Jerry West for the Lakers, I guess. And I have Billy Cunningham, who was an excellent rebounder and scorer for the 76ers. He also played in the ABA and won an MVP there. But definitely for his size, he was a great rebounder. And yeah, definitely someone you'd always want to have on your team. A great 6-man, just great role player. Helped Wilt Chamberlain win that championship ring in that 1967 76ers team, which is one of the greatest of all time. So that's Billy C. And also a really good coach later for Dr. J. Alright, then I have Tiny Archibald, who is one of the great small players of all time. Great point guard. along with Chris Paul and Isaiah Thomas, I guess you can say he's one of the greatest small players of all time. He led the league in assists and points in 1 year. I think he was putting up like 30, 32 and 14 or something crazy like that. So, and even his later career with the Celtics, when he won a ring with the Celtics, he was still a great role player. So I have Tiny Archibald up there. And then I have Jerry Lucas, who is one of the greatest rebounders of all time. I actually consider Nate Thurmond versus Jerry Lucas. But the problem with Nate Thurmond is that he was never part of the All-NBA team, whereas Jerry Lucas is actually won like 5 or 6 time All-NBA. And his career average in rebounding is like 15.6 rebounds per game, which is one of the highest all time, along with Bob Pettit, Bill Russell, Wilt Chamberlain, and Nate Thurmond. But he's definitely a better scorer than Nate Thurmond was. And even though Nate Thurmond was a much better defensive player, he was a much better defensive player than Jerry Lucas. But Jerry Lucas, overall, I think had a little bit of better career and also had a ring too, which Thurmond never had. So I have Jerry Lucas. And honorable mention to Dominique Wilkins, who is one of the greatest shooters of the 80s. Basically, he was the 80s version of Carmelo Anthony. Great shooter, but that's pretty much it. But that still counts for a lot because he is one of the best. I think 80s, I think it was him and Alex English that were one of the best scorers of the 80s and scored the most points during the 80s. Maybe it was Alex English who scored the most actually, but Dominique Wilkins basically human highlight reel, you know. Yeah, he's definitely one of the best dunkers of all time as well. And yeah, I top 10 small forward on most people's list because he led the Hawks during that time. So yeah, that's it. That's my NBA players list. I hope you enjoyed my video. If you have any comments or disagreements about what I made, then please let me know and let me know in the comments. But I basically put my opinions and why I think I rank those players so high and my ranking. So that's it. And I know ESPN is doing the ranking around the same time, and I really don't believe how they're doing the rankings because they put like Paul Ayers and Billy Cunningham in like the low 80s, which is just, I don't agree with that at all. I mean, they're like top, they were in the NBA's 50 greatest players celebration. How could you put them in the late 80s? It doesn't make any sense. And they put like Chris Bosh and like Kevin Love in the top 100, which doesn't make sense to me. So yeah, I think my ranking is better. So yeah, anyways, thanks for watching, guys.